In the West, the war had been slow in starting, but plans were progressing for the campaign on the inland waters, which would split the Confederacy. Shallow draft vessels were essential to river operations. J.B. Eads of St. Louis built 7 shallow draft, paddle wheel, partially armored gunboats. Each mounted 13 guns of various sizes. Eads gunboats were to be the core of the river fleet. The Tennessee and Cumberland rivers offered a natural means of flanking the Confederate forces in Kentucky. But Forts Henry and Donelson blocked the way. General Ulysses S. Grant and Flag Officer Andrew Foote led an expedition against these 2 strongholds. Heavy rains ruled out the joint attack on Fort Henry planned for 6 February 1862, so the gunboats attacked alone. After a short, violent action, the fort surrendered to Foote's battered fleet. A week later, the same force moved against Fort Donelson. This time, the task proved far more difficult, as the gunboats were under fire from fortifications on high ground. The St. Louis and Louisville were disabled and others badly damaged. The attack was suspended. However, the defending Confederate generals were convinced Fort Donelson could not be held and surrendered to Grant 2 days later. Confederate positions in Kentucky were now untenable. Their forces fell back into Tennessee. A pursuing Union army coming south from Cairo, Illinois, was stalled after capturing New Madrid on the west bank of the Mississippi River. To cross the river and attack heavily fortified Island No. 10, transports and naval gunfire were necessary. To get transports to the Army, Union troops dug a shallow canal across a narrow peninsula to bypass Island No. 10. Foote, meantime, used naval mortars to bombard the island. The improvised canal could not take the gunboats, and to support the Army movement, they would have to run past the batteries commanding the river. Commander Walk in the Carondelet was first to make the perilous attempt. Shrouded by darkness and a wild storm, the Carondelet successfully navigated the tortuous channel and passed the batteries without harm. The Pittsburgh made the same dash early in the morning of 7 April 1862. The Army crossed the river under cover of both gunboats. Island No. 10 surrendered to the Navy that night. The previous day, 100 miles to the south, the Great Battle of Shiloh raged. Here, 2 wooden gunboats under Lieutenant Gwynn saved Grant's river flank by repulsing a Confederate attack until Union reinforcements could arrive. Sea power had decided the issue on the upper rivers. During these operations, a large Union naval force was gathering at the mouth of the Mississippi, preparing for the assault on New Orleans. Flag Officer David Glasgow Farragut was in command, and under him, Commander David Dixon Porter had the gunboats and mortar boats. Guarding the approach to New Orleans were Forts Jackson and St. Philip. A difficult obstruction had been thrown up to block the narrow channel. Above the forts was a defending Confederate fleet, including the large but unfinished ironclad Louisiana, the ram Manassas, and 10 lightly armed craft. To take the city, Farragut would have to run the gauntlet of Confederate strength. For 6 days, the mortars bombarded the forts. 2 gunboats breached the obstruction. Then Farragut, in his flagship Hartford, moved the fleet up the channel early in the morning of 24 April 1862. The ships passed the forts through an exchange of heavy fire and engaged the Confederate fleet. The Manassas damaged 2 Federal ships, but was in turn destroyed. Only 3 Confederate vessels escaped. Next day, Farragut's ships anchored off New Orleans, where unusually high water gave them command of the streets. The city and forts surrendered. The North was jubilant over the Navy's victory. Loss of the largest and wealthiest city in the South was a stunning blow to the Confederacy and necessitated a concentration of forces to protect the vital supply line from the Southwest. Redeployment of Confederate troops left the Mississippi River open above Vicksburg. Memphis, now isolated, surrendered to the Navy in June after a brief but very sharp engagement on the river. That same month, Farragut's fleet ran past Vicksburg to join the Union forces moving south. Temporarily, the entire Mississippi was under Northern control, but it could not be kept open while the Confederates held their strong positions at Vicksburg. In addition, the river was falling, and sickness mounted in Farragut's fleet. Withdrawal of the Federal fleet was also hastened by the sudden appearance of the Confederate ram Arkansas. After roughing up several Federal vessels in the Yazoo River, she ran through the Union fleet to a refuge under the bluffs of Vicksburg. Farragut repassed the Vicksburg batteries and returned to New Orleans. In the east, General George McClellan had moved his army by water to Fortress Monroe during March and April 1862 for the Peninsula Campaign aimed at capturing Richmond. The presence of the dangerous ironclad Virginia in the area delayed McClellan until Federal troops took Norfolk in early May. The Virginia, now threatened with capture, was burned, and the James River was open to the Federal fleet, a circumstance that was to save McClellan from probable disaster. The Union Army, after advancing to within sight of Richmond, was caught in a trap by General Robert E. Lee, and its main line of communications cut. A large number of transports were hastily assembled at Malvern Hill to load supplies, while naval cannon covered the Army's move to a new base at Harrison's Landing. Here, the gunboats protected the Army's flanks and guarded Federal lines until August, when the Army withdrew by water to northern Virginia. For the remainder of 1862, land operations in the east moved too far inland to employ naval support. During these crucial first 2 years of Civil War, virtually every significant Union victory was made possible by the Navy's control of the sea. Most of the East Coast and the Mississippi River was in Federal hands. The blockade had seriously restricted Southern trade and was gradually strangling the Confederate economy. The South was increasing its use of blockade runners, but hundreds had been captured or destroyed. Cotton exports had dropped to a trickle, and Southern imports were only a fraction of actual needs. The North was building more and more ships to tighten its iron grip, while the South had several ingenious vessels and weapons nearly ready to challenge that stranglehold. For 2 years, both sides had fought valiantly. For 2 more years, their courage, strength, and ingenuity would be tested to the utmost before a final decision could be reached. As the year 1862 drew to a close, the Civil War had been raging for almost 2 years. The Federal Army in Virginia was staggering from another in a series of defeats. But in the West, Confederate armies had been pushed back steadily, in large part because of the unceasing pressure and great benefits of sea power. The Federal Navy's control of the sea and inland waters made it possible to seize most of the Mississippi River, to occupy strong points on the southern coast, and to tighten the blockade. Thus, the South's economy withered, while northern industry and foreign trade boomed. In the West, the war rushed to its climax. The Union objectives were to split the Confederacy and open the Mississippi River to northern commerce for overseas shipments. Supplies for the Confederates flowed along the Red River and across the Mississippi at Port Hudson, Grand Gulf, and Vicksburg.